Okay, my name is Buck Burkhartzmeyer.
And I am Bruce Burkhartzmeyer.
All right, perfect. We'll just jump right into it. Could you tell us about the opening of Burkhartzmeyer's?
In 2017, Sam and I did one of my favorite interviews, a joint interview with Buck and Bruce Burkhartzmeyer. Bruce was one of the co-owners of Burkhartzmeyer's Shoes at the time, and Buck was formerly one of the owners of Burkhartzmeyer's. Burkhartzmeyer's is a family business in downtown Faribault, Minnesota, that's been around since the end of the Second World War, through 3 generations of family ownership. And the story behind this family is interesting and heartwarming, and it still sticks with me to this day. I'm really glad that you're here to listen to it today as we publish it for the first time in full. Enjoy.
Well, our official opening date is 1949, but actually the history goes back a little bit farther than that. My grandfather, who would be, Buck's father, was a leather buyer at the Shaft-Pierce Shoe Factory here in town. I don't know if everyone knows, but at one time that was one of the major employers at town. I think it employed over 700 people at its peak. During the Depression, Shaft-Pierce factory closed. My grandfather, like I said, was a leather buyer, so he was very good with leathers and things like that. So he actually opened a small leather and harness repair shop over on, was it First Street over here, or what was it?
Yeah. First Avenue.
First Avenue, yeah. And that's really when it started. It was actually a repair shop.
Yeah. So it all begins at the Shaft-Pierce Shoe Factory, how we got into the shoe business. And after that, after World War II, my 2 brothers and myself all came back from the Navy. And one evening, my father called us up and says, come out to Cannon Lake by his home. And we sat around the table, and he wanted to know, he asked us if we'd like to go into business for ourselves and start our own store. So that's 68 years ago, and we're still here. We're still working, and I'm not working as much. Bruce is working harder. Anyway, so it's been kind of a family affair. And at first, my 3 brothers and my mother and father formed the first corporation. And then after that, a few years later, then Bruce and Brian came on and bought us out. And that's part of the history to start with anyway. And so
our initial location was down a block from where we are now. It was actually on the corner of, where Poyer's drugstore is now. Actually, now it's a pawn shop down there. But that we actually had an L-shaped store. Our shoe store was on Main Street, and then the repair shop was actually on 2nd Street over there. And it was kind of L-shaped. And then that was in 1949. And then in 1967 is we moved down to this building. And we've been here since 67.
Now, orthopedics are a huge part of Burkhartzmeyer's. How did orthopedics become a big part of the store?
Well, we kind of started, we call it kind of a crutch store. We kind of specialize in comfort sometimes more than style, and that's the main difference. You can't put the two together. I mean, either a comfort shoe isn't going to look as pretty as a style shoe. So that's how really we got started and known as a comfort store. And we've kind of continued that, and we carry some style and some comfort.
But in the Navy, didn't you do shoe repair and things like that?
Well, in the Navy,
that's where you got your training, wasn't it?
Well, I've been with shoes my whole life, actually, every day of my life. Every job I've ever had was shoes. In the Navy, I was put in by Dr. Sandberg, and I was working at a recruiting station, and these guys would come in. These young guys that were sitting behind a desk, and all of a sudden they made them get on the grinder and march for 4 or 5 hours. They got some pretty sore feet. So then Dr. Sandberg and I would work it out, and I did the padding because I've always liked to do that kind of work. And then after I got out of service, I continued my education and went to different schools. And I'm a certified podorthist. I'm a lot like a pharmacist. We modify shoes, we build up shoes, and we make orthotics and things like that, where most stores around the country don't do things like that.
We've always been involved in the podorthic business. When we actually started, though, we had a fair amount. We were just a regular shoe store when it started. I look back at some of the pictures back from the 50s and 60s, and we had some pictures of some of the displays, and my goodness, you guys bought some pretty high heels and some pretty wild stuff back then, you know. And then, but as time has evolved, you have to find a niche in the shoe business, and we've kind of focused on foot health and foot comfort, and that's really our niche. And we've kind of expanded from there, and but we're into a lot of comfort shoes, and you know, Buck says we're not style, we're not stiletto heels or things like that, but we are Euro comfort, and Euro comfort is fashion. You get lines like Dansko and Riker or Clark's and some of those brands. I mean, that's fashion as much as it's not, you know, like high heel, let's go out to eat kind of stuff. But we are in the foot health business, and that's kind of our niche, and that's where we kind of stay.
Now, what was your role originally in the stores?
Well, us three brothers, you know, it seems like the Lord gifted us all different. My oldest brother, Al, liked to do bookwork, and I didn't care for bookwork. Puts worked in the shop more and did a lot of the sewing and padding and that. And I did most of the, if some customer had come in with bad feet, they'd usually come and get me. So I took care of a lot of crippled feet, and I enjoyed doing that because it's nice to make people comfortable, and they'll remember you. Comfort lasts a long time. Style is a short time. So that's the way I look at it. And I'd rather sell comfort shoes than I would style shoes.
And how did your role change as the store went on?
Well, you know, we each kind of fell into our own category, and we proceeded that way. And then, of course, we'd help each other. We'd buy together, and that's a big job, buying nowadays. You know, you have 40, 50 salesmen come in, and they're all trying to sell you everything they got. Well, you got to be able to say yes and no both. We've actually, when the freight comes in our store, we have a big table in the back, and we unload the freight. And first thing we do, we check the inventory, that we didn't get paid for something that they sent, and we got what we are paying for. And first thing we do, we have to make out a computer label for the cash register. The next thing we do, we put an inventory slip inside of each box, and then we check those inventory slips off every evening. And if a good shoe is selling real well, when you sell 5 or 6 shoes of one style, then you want to either get some more of those because that's something that people like. That's how our day starts when we open the stores, is a freight a lot of times.
And how did your role in the store kind of change throughout the years?
Well, it's interesting. You know, Al was my father. You know, he was the oldest of the three. He liked the bookwork, and through my schooling and stuff, I liked that kind of things too. So I kind of fell into the role that he had of doing the bookwork, a lot of the buying, you know, the advertising, you know, the personnel, a lot of those kinds of things. Brian, my cousin and partner, who was Buck's son, kind of fell in the role that Buck had, and he got a little more into the foot health, the foot comfort. He also is a certified podorthist, which means they have extra training. It doesn't mean they're doctors by any means, but they have extra training where they can fill doctors' prescriptions and things like that. And part of our longevity is we've seen about every kind of foot ailment there is. So if people come in, even though, you know, we have no doctors on staff, we can help with almost any problem. And in fact, many of the doctors in town, if there's a foot issue, they just send them down to see us because they know that we can take care of those things.
So how was it for you handing off the store to the next generation of Bruce and Brian?
Okay. Well, Brian would follow me around, and I taught him a lot of things, and he seemed to enjoy that kind of work, and I did too. I get a lot of satisfaction when, like, I had a lady come in the other day, and she walked by me, she tapped me on the shoulder, and I was sitting on a stool waiting on. She says, "We finally got that heel pain out of my foot," and she was really happy about it. Those are the kind of things I like to see, you know, happen, and things have changed. I think Bruce will go along with you on this, but like we used to, years ago, every 10 pair of shoes we'd sell, there'd be at least 7 pair of leather shoes and 3 pair of tennis shoes. Now it's kind of reversed. It's 7 pair of tennis shoes and 3 pair of shoes. Won't you go along with me on that, Bruce?
Oh, yes.
You know,
yes, athletics would be big volume, but some of the athletics are almost like comfort footwear. Right. New Balance, for instance, does sizes and widths. They do narrows, mediums, wides, extra wides, and double extra wides. So it's almost like comfort footwear. It's just the appearance has changed a little bit from years past.
All right. Well, now we'll talk about your service in the military. So first of all, What compelled you to join the U.S. Navy?
What else do I do?
Or what compelled you? Why did you join?
The Navy.
In the Navy, I kind of got into padding shoes in the Navy, and before I went in, they recognized that I had some shoe repair trade and some orthopedic work before, and when they saw my resume in the Navy, that's why I got put in that department, and I enjoyed it, and that's how I pursued it after I got out of service.
What was tough about being in the Navy?
What?
What was difficult about being in the Navy?
In the Navy?
Yeah.
Well, you're away from home, and it's hard to get used to it, but I was very fortunate. My two brothers, Bruce was shot at, and Bruce's dad had a very bad plane crash. Bruce can tell you a little bit about that. I mean, you can go from there, Bruce, and tell him a little bit about Al's plane crash.
Well, I think the hardest part for the family was my grandparents had all three of her sons were in the service, and Putz and Buck Putz and Al, my dad, were both overseas. I don't think you didn't go overseas,
I didn't
so
have to go
I think you stayed home. But my father was in a very bad plane crash. In fact, he's the only survivor out of his plane, and the family did not know if he's alive or not. So that was hard on all of them, especially my grandmother and the brothers too. And I think they were even told he was probably missing, wasn't it, at one time?
He didn't give us any information.
But he was in the hospital for almost 2 years.
Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, and after that, my brother Al was a radioman on an airplane, and he was sitting in the middle of the plane towards the back, and they were on a small island. Well, you get on a small island, and you get an airplane with 2,000 or 3,000 gallons of gas and two 500-pound bombs, and the plane tried to take off, and it couldn't take off. And there happened to be 40 Navy fighter planes with their wings folded up like you see on an aircraft carrier. Well, Al's plane came down in the middle of those, and they all blew up like dominoes. So there was 40-some people killed altogether. There was 10 on the plane or 11?
I think there was 12.
12 on the plane.
He's the only
11
one who survived.
killed. And Al the plane split open, and Al could see the ocean. He was completely on fire, but he ran to the ocean and jumped in the kind of salt water, and it put the flames out, but he was burned completely, and he had a lot of surgeries after that. So.
Wow. And how was being in the Navy beneficial to you?
Well, I was very fortunate. I went out for basketball. I made the Navy basketball team, and there was an NBA guy on my team, and there was 3 All-State kids. So we had a real good team, and we played all the colleges like University of Oregon, University of Montana, things like that, and I enjoyed that a lot in service. I was very fortunate. My 2 brothers were, it seemed like they got overseas, they had to do a little more than I ever had to do. I was very lucky.
All right. And so you stayed here in the States. How did you keep in touch with your family while you were in the Navy?
Well, we had a terrific mother and father both, but my mother would write us every day. At that time, when you were in service, they could write a letter and just put free on it. They wouldn't have to put any stamps on it. So Mother was very fortunate. She'd always sit down every day and write a short note or letter how her and Dad were working out in the shoe repair shop. So.
And then we'll talk about your family now. What was your father, Ferdy, like?
Ferdy, real name Ferdinand, but we called him Ferdy. That's how our first business was Ferdy Shoe Repair. That was the name of it over on First Avenue. And then I think we bought our first shoes, a few of them on consignment, didn't we, Bruce?
Well, that was before my time, but that's what I've heard. Yes,
yeah. We bought
a few work boots, wasn't it? A few work boots.
We bought a few shoes on consignment. Consignment means that if you don't sell them, you can send them back. Nowadays, when we buy like 24 pair of shoes, we might sell the larger sizes. No, we don't sell the larger size as well, and the smaller size we don't sell as well. The middle sizes you sell better, So people think everything is profit, but those shoes we had to pay for too, the smaller ones and the larger ones. So that's the way it goes in business sometimes.
He was asking what Ferdy was like, though.
Oh, Ferdy, yeah. Ferdy was he was a good craftsman, you know. He was a skilled cutter, and he was very neat about his work. And he had so much work every night that he would take a box home and have a table at home and do small work at home and bring them back the next day and finish them in the shop. So he was continually working, and he was quite a grandpa. I remember when all of our grandchildren were they were different ages, you know, from 2 maybe to 13. And my dad went to the bank and got a little green box, and he put $50 in each box. And the little kids down on this end, the 2-year-old and the 3-year-old, they were playing with the quarters like this, and the camera went along, and you get to the other end, the bigger kids were going like this, counting the 1s and 5s and 10s. You could sure tell the difference in age.
Yeah. And what was your mother Martha like?
Well, Mother Martha she was German. She's a very hard worker woman, and she helped Dad every day. She came in and she would run the patch machine in the repair shop. Then she'd wait on people. That would leave my father time to do more work, because it's hard, you know, to have to wait on everybody and then you stop working. And so she helped out my dad a lot when we were gone in service.
But she loved the business, and she, a really cute story. You know, she lived to be 107. She was 3 weeks short of 108 when she passed away. And it was one of her final weeks. She actually caught pneumonia, and she knew that she probably wasn't going to get through. And this was in March. And, you know, she wanted to make sure everybody got up to see her and stuff. And, of course, not that we weren't. We were always up there seeing her anyways. But she wanted to make sure this week that everybody got up there. So we went up there, and I walked in, and I thought we'd be talking about past things from the past. And she looks me in the eye, and she says, "Bruce," she says, "you got the taxes done yet for the year?" You know, she's 108, lying on her deathbed, but she wanted to make darn sure I had the taxes done. But that's what kept her going. I mean, her mind was just super sharp, right to the very end. I mean, she knew everybody. We have a bunch of relatives out in Rochester, New York, and one of them stopped to visit one day, and they went up to see Martha, and she was telling about the relatives out there that they didn't even know about, that they had, and they were from Rochester, New York and stuff. So her mind was just sharp as a tack, and she loved her family, she loved her kids, and she loved to be involved with her kids and with her grandkids. My daughter and her are very close, or were very close, and she, of course, she was a girl, you know, it was predominantly a male family. So I was the oldest. I was actually the first granddaughter she had in the family. So she took great pride in that, but she was a lot of fun.
All right. And what was Al like?
Al was always more of he was known as Mr. Downtown. He was always stuck to business, and whenever a new business came into Faribault downtown, he'd always greet him, and people remember that. I mean, he never gave up on working with a business. He always was a businessman, and dressed like one and acted like one, you know. Al didn't play as much sports as Putz and I have, but yeah, so.
Well, he was known as, like Buck said, as almost like Mr. Faribault. If there was a service board or service committee in town in someplace, he probably was on it at one point or another. And just very, very involved with downtown, knew everybody in town. And like Buck said, if there was a new business, he'd be the first one down there, shaking their hand and welcoming them to town and showing people around. I know he was on the hospital board, and he was showing new hospital administrators around to encourage them to come to Faribault. When one of the new banks opened, he was on that board, you know, trying to, you know, get a new director for that bank in town and things, and just very involved with everything that was going on in downtown.
If you walk down the street, just one block here, on the corner of the bank building, you'll see a plaque with my brother's name on it. Al looked at that bank clock, the security bank building, and it never worked for 15 years, and that really, really bothered him. And he was a good, strong Rotarian, and Al decided when he passed away, that memorials would go towards that clock. And it ended up, I think Al raised, $7,000-8,000 for the clock, and Rotary picked up the rest. It cost over $20,000 to do that clock over.
That was one of the landmark, you know, features of downtown Faribault. It was one of the icons of downtown, and it always bothered me that clock didn't work. And so even that was one of his wishes, that some of his memorial money would go to fix that clock up. And he was a Rotarian. He did not miss a meeting for 52 years. I think he still has the record for longevity with Rotary. And I remember he planned his heart surgery around making up a Rotarian meeting. He was in Africa once when KDHL took a trip to a bunch of people from Faribault area to Africa. He went to a meeting. He was the only one that spoke English. He had no idea what was being said, but he made up Rotary over in Africa and things like that. So it was very important to him. And so the Rotary Club, in his honor, picked up that project and redid the clock. And it's gorgeous down there. It really is gorgeous. And so that was part of his legacy.
And what was Walter like, Putz?
Well, Putz was he got his name Putz from putzing around. He'd climb the walls. We had a neighbor lived behind us, had a bell, and when it get dark, he'd run in the backyard and he'd ring that bell. he always got into trouble that way, so my dad just nicknamed him Putz instead of Walter, from putzing around. That's what you call it. He was a good-hearted kid, though. If you needed anything, he'd take his shirt off his back, give it to you. And,
he could fix anything. He was very handy. He was a lot like my grandfather that way. He could fix and patch just about anything. But he was a big outdoorsman. He loved to hunt and fish, and his sons, especially Tommy, have followed in that footstep. They loved to hunt and fish just like he did. But
he played for the Faribault Lakers. At that time, the Faribault Regional Center had a baseball field behind it called Station A, and was the nicest ballpark in Faribault. So that's where the Faribault Lakers, and Putz was center fielder. He could take the ball from center field and throw it direct to the catcher without a bounce, and he had a pretty good arm. Yeah.
How did you meet Delilah?
Delilah, I met her she came to Faribault to teach in a parochial school. And I went over there and talked to her one day and took her out. And she was PK. She was a preacher's daughter, but so it took her a while to train me.
What was she like?
Oh, she was, Delilah was a very, very pleasant gal. And I lost her about 7 years ago with Alzheimer's. And we had over 60-some good wedded years together. And we had four children. And 3 boys and 1 girl. And we had a happy family and a lively family. So.
And how do you think Brian and Bruce are doing?
Well, Brian and Bruce are doing okay. I watch the figures like my mother. If they go ahead for the month or behind for the month, we always watch that. And they both work hard. And Bruce had a pretty tough operation that set him back here 2 years ago or 1 year.
Just last fall, yeah.
And, he's lost about 50 pounds, and so he's coming back now. And Brian's kind of a hyper kid. He's a good worker, and he's a natural salesman. He probably sells more than any clerk in the store. But each person is made different. Some people know how to close a sale, and some people don't. But Brian has always been able to sell very well.
How do you think you and Brian are doing?
Well, it's funny. We actually have been running the store since 1986 is when we actually bought it. So that's almost 30 years now. Most people still think that Butts and that bun owns the store, but we've actually been running it for 30 years, and I'm proud of what we've been able to do. I mean, we've been able to keep a family business going through 3 generations. That's not easy to do today. It's not easy to survive in retail anymore, much less keep a family business going. So we've been very fortunate. We've been very blessed to have great customers. One thing about being a family business is it spans generations, not only in our family but in our customers too. And you see, some of these families. I remember when I first started, back in the 70s. I mean, you'd get back to school. The families come in, they'd have their kids, 6, 7, 8 kids lined up, and we'd go right down the line and fit them all. Well, now a lot of those kids are bringing their kids and their grandkids back. Although the families aren't as big anymore. It's maybe 2 or 3 kids, not necessarily 7, 8 like it used to be. But that is one nice thing about being a family business. You get to know your customers very well. And you get to know them on a first name basis. And that's part of what the customers appreciate too, that they can come in here and someone can say hi and who they are and how's dad or how's and then that was another thing my dad did. Boy, if there was a funeral or something from a good customer, within a 50-mile radius or so, he'd make sure he'd be at those wakes and funerals and stuff. And people really appreciate that, that someone would take that interest to come and do something like that.
So you mentioned Burkhartzmeyer's. It's kind of a story of prosperity here in this town, being able to keep the family business around. What do you think people can take away from Burkhartzmeyer's story in the town of Faribault?
Well, I think we offer a service where a lot of people don't. I had a fellow come in yesterday and bought some work shoes. He had a couple rips on it. I sewed those shoes up, and his laces were worn out. I put new laces in them. I put a little oil on them before he purchased the new shoes. Boy, was he happy. He was really happy. I mean, it takes you a little time to do that, but I think those extra little service things help when you do that for people. That, you're not going to get that in a lot of stores.
We sell shoes, but we aren't we don't get down and dirty with price. I mean, we're very competitive with our pricing and things like that, but we're really more like, where do you go for baby's first pair of shoes? Or if my foot hurts, where do I go? I have a bunion. What do I do about that? Or I work on concrete all day. Can you help me with that? That's really what we're all about. We're about foot health. And as the population ages today, there's becoming less and less places you can go to get that kind of advice and stuff. I mean, the chain stores certainly don't have that. And there's becoming fewer and fewer, stores like ours that have the experience we have and the shoe experience we have. So that's a big plus for us. And, even be able to repair shoes. Our shoe repair is a huge draw for people. Now, many towns around here have lost theirs. Owatonna, Mankato, Austin, Albert Lee, Waseca. I mean, again, that's a business that there was maybe a mom and pa that did that, but once they retired, there was no one to take that business on. We've been very fortunate, that Brian was able to take the repair shop after Buck and Puts, and Buck still helps, and we actually hired a repair guy, and now Larry's been with us over 40 years.
Yeah.
And but he's getting to a point where he's getting ready to retire too. So we actually had to hire a new person here and train him, because there are no schools that train shoe repair anymore. So for that business to continue, someone has to teach them how to do it. So that's one of the things we're working on right now is to be able to continue that service into the next generation.
What has it been like to see your family and your name become a staple of the community?
Well, I've had a guy come in the store the other day, and he says to me, I have to admire your family working under one roof for 60-some years. He says, well, how did you get along? I said, well, we might have a little bit of argument once in a while, but I tell you, we had a Christian mother and father, and we seemed to always work out the problems, and our families got along pretty good, and that's...
Well, my grandfather always said, you don't just take from a community, you always have to give back. And I think that's a big part. We've always been very involved in the community, too. Like my father was a big Rotarian, Puts was in the Lions Club, the Euro and Exchange Club. I've been in the JCs. I've been very active with the Downtown Faribault Association, and I know Brian's been involved with different committees around town and things like that. So, you have to be able to give back to a community to be part of that community, and I think that's one of the things we've all appreciated. My grandfather kind of drilled that into us as part of our legacy, so we've all been very involved, and that's part of why I think we've been able to survive as long as we have.
What do you think of life in Faribault?
Life in Faribault? Well, that's kind of a tough question to answer. I mean, it's changing a lot now, and we have to accept the new people coming into town. And like my daughter is a teacher, and she's so dead at school. She says the kids intermingle, and they get along so much better after a couple of years. But the adults take a little longer time to do that, because we're not used to these certain things that they do, and they're not used to us yet. But so it's coming, and we're trying hard.
I think it's easy for people to say that the grass is always greener someplace else, especially young people. But Faribault's a very vibrant community. I mean, you look at our downtown, and no, it's not like it used to be, but there isn't retail like there used to be. I mean, retail in general is, you look at all the malls and read about all the stories about all the malls having all the trouble they're having. I mean, retail is much more difficult today. But our downtown has been able to maintain. We have beautiful buildings downtown, many historic buildings down here. Our city's very involved with keeping downtown looking nice, keeping the community vibrant, and there's really a lot to do do in town. If you really, look around, our chamber is very active. Our Main Street program is very active, and things like the brewery and the new spirit club we're going to get down with. Those are things that build communities, and you grow from there. So I'm really quite excited about downtown.
Well,
and what's going to
I
happen.
remember going to a chamber meeting, and a man from the Gray Style Shop got up and he says, Faribault should be very, very proud that we've got 10 lakes within 10 miles of this town. Most towns would give their right arm for one lake. We're very fortunate to have 10. Another thing that we're fortunate to have, Nature Center. I mean, it's a beautiful place, and a lot of schools are using it now, coming over here for educational purposes. There's not many cities that have 200 acres of land where you can go and walk through and learn some educational things. So we do have a lot to offer.
And I believe Buck has some props that you'd like to show us.
Yeah, I was going to show you a few.
We just had some pictures of the past, which is kind
Yeah,
of fun if you get a close-up of them or not.
Well, I don't know if you can get an idea. This, of course, is where we started over here in Ferdy's Shoe Repair Shop in 1940. And then we moved over next to Poyer's Drug Store. S&L Company was here, and Poyer's was here. And we had our back, this was our store over on Central Avenue.
If you notice, even back then, the sign company couldn't get our name right. They had Burkhartzmeyer. They had it hyphenated. Well, my dad took advantage of that. When a salesman would come in and want to sell some shoes, he'd say, well, I'm Mr. Burke, but Mr. Hartzenmeyer aren't here today, so we can't help you, he said. But
if you get a shot of that or not, I'll hold it up a little bit for you. Changed. The other props I have are, well, we can go down a few of those things if you like. You can hand me those first two things there, Bruce. I was at the University of...
Is that all your questions? Are you through that part? Okay.
I was at the University of New York for 2 weeks of schooling, and I met Joe Famolari. Joe Famolari made this sole here. It took the wave, we call it a wave sole, and took the weight off the ball of the foot. Joe made over $1 million on this. So I thought, well, gosh, if he could do something like that, I could do something like that. So I tried to hire a lawyer. I got a patent lawyer, and I come out. Now, the average person that walks into our store either have heel pain or metatarsal pain. So what I did, I posted up the heel all the way around to give cushion on both sides. And then the way I weighed this, I took the weight off the ball of the foot. But these are some of the papers I had to go through the lawyers to get it patented. And I tell you, it's a very hard thing to get anything patented. I spent probably $7,000 just trying to do the lawyers' fees in doing this. And so that doesn't work. You can give me those two things next there. You can give me both of those.
Okay, I'll give you that.
Actually, when a shoe starts out in a shoe factory, all shoes have to start out with a wooden last. Now, this particular shoe was made in Faribault, in Shaft Pierce Shoe Company, and it's a well-made shoe. It's a Goodyear welt. And when you buy a Goodyear welt, you can tear it apart, you can repair it. Now, I just want to show you all the parts that go into a shoe like this. You want to give me that plywood? See, you don't realize how many parts are in that shoe. Okay, well, so you see the steel shank? The steel shank goes under the middle of the ball right here. The filling, the cork goes in the middle to smooth it out. This is a Celeste box toe where they harden the toe so you have room for your toes. This is the vamp on the side. This is the tip, and this is the tongue. And then you go down to the heel counter in the back to give it support. That goes around here. The heel base goes on top of the sole, and then this finishes there. So you can see why shoes are expensive. Every year now, in January, the company has to buy all these different parts from all these different factories. And every January, the workers usually get a raise, and that's the cost of living raise. And then you see the price goes up on everything. This is one demonstration that's really kind of nice because it shows you how many pieces actually go into a shoe. And it takes a lot of work to make a good shoe. Now this is a regular ladies last here. Yeah, you see when they have to put that on straight, and this is, we call it a dummy tie in the factory. They put that dummy tie in just to hold it straight. When you turn it over, you can see all the holes in here, how many times how many pairs of shoes were made off of this. And there's an awful lot of work to making a pair of shoes. And the most important thing about the shoe is the last. However the last is shaped, that's how your shoe is going to be shaped. Now I'll take that next, yeah. Now see, these are all ladies' last, and they're all size 9. But you can see the difference in the length. So you never want to come in a store and say, I wear a 7.5B, because one company will make a 7.5B and another company will make a 7.5B, but each one uses a different piece of wood. So it's always a little different shape to it. Just shows you how would you get the big shoe over here. Now, when people walk in a shoe store, they're always, oh, I don't think you'll have my size. Well, now this is size 1, and this is a size 18. So you see the store has to carry lots of inventory, and it's very expensive. Our inventory runs maybe $300,000 worth of shoes in here all the time. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's left. But so you see it. You can't fit everybody right away, but we fit a majority of them. I spend 1 day a week going over to Red Wing Shoe Factory. I've had 2 men come over from here, and I've trained them because they've learned. I taught them how to build up shoes. And they went back there now, and they have 8 people in their shoe repair shop over there now, where they do a lot of their own build-ups now, which they come in from all over in many different countries, many different states, because they ship all over the world. Red Wing has over 1,000 people working in Red Wing. They have another family shoe store, another store, shoe repair, not shoe repair, but a factory down in Missouri, where they employ another 100. They employ another 1,000 people. So that's 2,000 people they have the payroll. So we can be very happy that's still in the United States, because about 75% of all shoes are made out of the United States now.
All right, well, thank you, Buck.
Yeah.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank
Okay.
you so much.
Thank you.
All right,
very
you
much.
bet.
That was
You bet.
really wonderful.
I hope you guys learned something.
Oh,